Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We have a really good show today. My guest has been on before, and many of you know Doug Brignole. He's emerged as possibly the most influential author, insightful author of training techniques of our time. And his books have shown people that train smarter is actually possible when you pay attention to physiology and kinesiology. And he has discovered more effective ways of building strength and muscle while mitigating the risk associated with achieving those goals. When you look at the guy, he's 62 years old. He looks like he's at least 20 years younger because he carries the physique and the conditioning of a much younger man. But training only builds muscle. And don't get me wrong, it stimulates fat loss. But being ripped is a function of diet. I don't know if anybody's really gotten into the discussion with Doug about his diet, because you can build muscle, but you'll never see your abs because abs are made in the kitchen. And just like training, it requires a plan and it requires consistency. And so we're going to talk to Doug about diet today. Like I said, I don't know if he's talked to anybody about nutrition, but we're going to get into Doug's kitchen today and understand better what happens that makes him so ripped and so conditioned. Before we get started, we have to thank our title sponsor, Legendary Foods, shrnetwork.biz/legendary. If you want a snack that will help you feel like you're cheating, but you're not, the new Tasty Pastry is it. The original Tasty Pastry is a harder pastry crust, kind of like a Pop-Tart. The new one is flaky and light, kind of like you would see in an apple turnover. The new one has 20 grams of protein, the old one 9, but they both have less than 1 gram of sugar. And so you can snack to your heart's content and not worry about sugar content and how you're derailing your diet. In fact, you can fit it into your macros easily. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 to save 10% off. And of course, on every show, we pick some names. When you hear the secret word during the commercial break, simply email that secret word to onair@superhumanradio.net. Please include your mailing address so we can ship the winners their boxes of tasty pastries. So check that out. Don't forget to listen during the commercial break. And now, without further delay, let's get Doug on screen with me and the graphics up here. Hey, Doug, how you doing, brother?
Good, Carl. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Doug, what I said is true, right? I mean, you build muscle with your training styles, but your diet contributes to the fact that you're ripped and so lean, right?
Well, yes, diet obviously has plays a major role not only in our body fat percentage, but also in our health, which I am practically more concerned about optimal health than I am concerned about my appearance. I mean, it's nice to be lean. I'm not competing right now. If I was competing, I'd be more concerned about my appearance. But it just so happens that both, are remedied. Body fat and health are remedied with the same diet.
And that's convenient, isn't it? That's something
Very nice.
The fathers of physical culture understood that. Bernard McFadden, Armand Tanny, Jack LaLanne. I mean, I can go through the list, and I'm throwing these names out because before we start this discussion, who really influenced you the most in your current diet style? Can you name somebody? Gironda? Anybody?
Yeah, I would name Jeff Feliciano. I would not. Nobody knows who Jeff Feliciano is because he wasn't a competitive bodybuilder, but he is a biochemistry genius. He was kind of along the lines of a Dan Duchaine, except Dan Duchaine focused more on anabolics and things. But my friend Jeff and I have been buddies since I was 17 years old. And look, I got ripped when I was competing for Mr. California and Mr. America, but I'm not using that diet now because that diet doesn't optimize health. I was eating a super, super low fat diet, essentially a zero fat diet. Right. And that means that you have to eat carbs, and you have to eat kind of a lot of carbs. And the carbs that I was eating mostly was rice and baked potatoes. And, you can get away with that from a health standpoint when you're young.
Right.
But you can't get away with it when you're older. I mean, Albert Beckles was famous for eating chicken and rice, and he was always ripped. And so you could look at that and say, well, then that's the way to go. Well, the vitamins and the minerals and the enzymes are all in the fruits and the vegetables. So you're going to be really lacking in nutrients if you're eating rice and potatoes instead of vegetables and fruits. But separate from that, dietary fat plays a very important role in health. We need both saturated and unsaturated, although we shouldn't go overboard on the saturated fat. But what I discovered is that body fat goes up if you're spiking your insulin too much. Mm-hmm. Now, I say that
obviously a very high carb load is going to do that.
Now, I kind of hesitate to say that because there seems to be a trend right now with people poo-pooing the insulin rise, which I don't understand why they would poo-poo it. I mean, there's plenty of evidence. Now, at best, you might suggest that not everyone has an obesity issue when they spike the insulin, and not everyone spikes insulin when they eat starchy or sugar carbs. That's true. But a big percentage of the people do. A large percentage of people do actually overproduce insulin when they eat starchy carbs and sugars. And a significant percentage of those people will end up overweight for it, as well as having health consequences for it.
And in fact, I've talked about on this show that for almost a decade now, maybe longer. I did my first show about checking your blood sugar, not being a diabetic, but checking your blood sugar from a health and performance standpoint with a guy named Chuck. His nickname was Chuck the Ripper something. I can't think of his name now. Back in 2007, I bought my first glucometer then, and I would check my blood sugar post-meal to see what meals did to me, which meals spiked my blood sugar and which didn't. But now I've come to learn that insulin is more important than blood sugar spikes. We're looking at the wrong side. We know that insulin ages you. We know that insulin damages you. And we know there are a lot of people out there who have what would be considered by most physicians healthy blood sugar. But because doctors never, or almost never, order both an insulin, fasting insulin and fasting glucose side by side to see how much insulin are you producing to stay in the 80s or the 70s.
Right.
That we're starting to understand that insulin is really a culprit. Insulin causes vascular damage. Insulin just causes a lot of problems. So I do agree with you. And there are some people, I use this analogy whenever I hear people say, well, you can be overweight or obese and still be healthy. And I say, no, you can't. I could buy a Mini Cooper and I could put a fifth wheel on the back of it and I could traverse the United States. And maybe after the first 2 or 3 trips, people would say the car is still in great shape, but the car is going to break down because it's not made to do that. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at a snapshot, my favorite analogy, Doug, that I just came up with the last time we were talking about this is, if you jump off a 100-story building, you're still alive at the 50th story.
Right, exactly.
But you're going to hit the ground and die. So you
Yeah.
could make the argument like, oh, I could jump off a building and not die if you watch me at the 50th story and then the 30th. But then when you hit the ground, you're going to die.
Yeah,
so
right.
the inevitability is there. So I do agree with you. I think that science and scientific opinion changes as like a pendulum. It swings back and forth.
Right.
But yes, I absolutely agree with you that both insulin and fasting blood sugar play a role. So let's talk about what you learned from. Tell me his name again. His last name is Feliciano.
Jeff Feliciano.
Okay, so what did you learn from Jeff Feliciano? Do you eat multiple meals a day, for instance?
Well, let me just tell you what prompted the conversation. I had a herniated disc that needed to be fixed. This was about 4 years ago now. And before any surgery, you have to have a pre-op. And so I went to my doctor, and my doctor, who is a friend of mine for many years, is a cardiologist. And so he did the regular blood tests and all that. And then he said, listen, as long as you're here, why don't we just do a calcium score to see how much plaque you have in your arteries. Right. You're, 57 years old right now. And I see on your family history that your father had heart disease. So you might as well, I know you work out every day. You probably have a very good diet, but let's just check it out. I said, fine. Turns out I had a really high score, meaning that's very bad. I had a lot of plaque in my arteries.
All right.
And I mean, obviously he doesn't know much about my past, but he said, well, let's not worry about it just yet. Let's first do another couple of tests. One was a nuclear treadmill test, and the other was an angiogram. And what they're trying to find out is whether or not there's any narrowing in any one particular place.
Right.
So if you have a lot of plaque, but it's evenly distributed and there is no imminent danger of something being blocked, then you're not in danger at the moment. So you're safe for now. He says to me, which was extraordinary. He says, well, you're fine for now. Come back and see me next year. Keep doing what you've been doing until then. Keep doing what I've been doing until then. Well, how do you think I got here?
Right. And now that we have a target, why don't we change things up?
It was amazing to me. Yeah. It's really sort of emphasized the fact that cardiologists or doctors in general are not focused on prevention. They're focused on, if you're going to have a heart attack tomorrow, let's do, this and this and this today.
Right.
But, never mind your diet. And part of the reason could be because they don't know. And part of the reason could be because they realize that most people don't adhere to dietary advice anyway.
Yes. So
they probably figure, look, let's just give you a statin because you're not going to change your diet. And that just, history shows people are resistant to change, especially dietary change. So that's what prompted me to call Jeff Feliciano. And I said, hey, I just got a really bad calcium score. I've been working out every day, 5 to 6 days a week for 30, 40 years. I eat a low-fat diet. I don't know what's going on here. He goes, well, that's your problem. You eat a low-fat diet. He says,
that means, because the flip side is you eat a high-carb diet.
He says, you've been following the American Heart Association guidelines, right? And I go, well, yeah. He goes, food pyramid, right? I go, yeah. He says, big mistake. I go, big mistake? He goes, look, 80% of the cholesterol that's in your arteries, your body made.
Right.
And it made it with insulin. He says, so in the absence of dietary fat, you have more of an insulin spike because there's nothing to slow down the carbohydrate absorption.
Right.
He said, and so someone like you who has that tendency will overproduce insulin, and you've gotten away with it this long because you happen to have decent genetics enough to keep you lean. So there's no visible sign that you need to change your diet. He goes, but the low-fat diet is generally very, very unhealthy. And so I said, so what do you recommend? He says, look, the first thing I'd recommend is eat lots of olive oil and lots of avocado and lots of omega-3, either in, supplemental form or salmon. He said, but there's nothing wrong with eating some butter, eating some egg yolks, eating some beef, eating some coconut oil, eating some ghee, butter. He said, you just can't eat too much of it, but you should be getting about 1/3 of your fat intake from saturated fat, 2/3 from unsaturated sources, and your fat intake should be at least 1/3 of your calories of the day, if not 40%.
Mm-hmm.
Really? And I go, he goes, so what about protein and carbs? He says, so 30% protein, 30% carbs, mostly from low glycemic sources. He says, do that for 3 months. Do that for 3 months. Just take out all the starches, all the rice, all the potato, any, thing made with flour, crackers, muffins, bagels, pasta, anything like that. Take it all out.
80% of the American diet.
Yeah, right. And people go, what do you eat instead? Well, that's because people don't know how valuable vegetables are.
Well, and I see people, Elisa and I always comment, we'll go to a breakfast place. One of our favorite breakfast places here is First Watch. And we'll look over at the table and the lady will have pancakes and toast, you know what I mean?
Right.
And fruit.
And maple syrup.
And of course, maple syrup. And that's breakfast. And, and then and then they look at me, I get 6 eggs over medium. And, I get a piece of ham and I get a couple pieces of English muffin and, it's the complete flip side. Right. And I'm sure they look at me and think, oh my God, this guy's going to have a heart attack.
Right. Well, a lot of times if they see that I'm a bodybuilder at a restaurant, they say, do you just want an egg white omelet? No, regular eggs. Really? Well, so the point was that after 3 months of doing exactly what he recommended I do, drastically increase my fat intake, lower my carbohydrate intake, but replace the kind of carbohydrate I was eating, moderate protein intake, my cholesterol went from 290 to 148.
Right.
In 3 months.
Right.
Now, that isn't absolute proof that a high-fat diet does not lead to high cholesterol and that a low-fat diet does not lead to low cholesterol.
Right.
I don't know what does.
And when people go to their doctor and they're told that their cholesterol is high, the first thing the doctor says is cut out cheese, cut out meat, cut out eggs.
Right.
And what do they replace that with? Pasta, bagels,
right?
More, and people fail to realize that triglyceride is an amino acid. I'm sorry, is a fat bonded to a sugar, and you can't make triglycerides without more sugar.
Right. So it is interesting. I mean, in the marketing of food also confuses people because you'll go to the store, you'll see fat-free this and fat-free that, and the assumption is that that's healthier. Well, it might be healthier if the fat you would otherwise be using would be a trans fat. That's a terrible fat to be eating.
Right.
And polyunsaturated fats are fairly unstable, so you don't want to eat it safflower oil or corn oil. But if you're eating butter or, beef or eggs or cheese, that's fine. And if you're eating coconut oil and olive oil and avocado oil and avocados, you're going to have, a very healthy lipid profile, a very healthy serum blood test.
So how many,
you're going to be lean.
How many meals now? So now that we've zeroed in on kind of really some of the things you're describing sound very much Mediterranean. And I know you're originally Brazilian, right? You're Brazilian?
Colombia. No, my parents are from Chile, South America.
Okay, Chile. And so that diet is kind of like Mediterranean, lots of seafood, lots of vegetables, healthy fats and stuff like that.
Lots of olive oil, yeah.
Olive oil. So the diet you're describing is actually more like a Mediterranean diet. And that has gained a lot of popularity over the years. But what about meal frequency? Does that play a role in staying lean, getting lean?
Well, no, it doesn't. In fact, we hear a lot about intermittent fasting now, which isn't a bad way to go. You could definitely, and when they say intermittent fasting, that could be literally a 12-hour fast, meaning that you're eating once a day, right? Or you're eating, there's different kinds of spacing. You can space it out 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours.
Right.
So the fact is you don't need frequent meals. In fact, I would say that if you're eating twice a day, you're eating frequently enough.
Well, so now there are other people within this silo who say without frequent meals, you cannot turn on the anabolic machinery and build the most muscle.
That was the conventional wisdom and has been for a lot of years. But I think it's really been thrown into question lately. I think there's more research that shows that it's not that important to eat protein so often. We were told that if you didn't eat protein every 3 hours, you go into a negative nitrogen balance.
Right.
Catabolic. Well, look, first of all, it's probably debatable whether it is actually 3 hours. And by the way, if you do go negative nitrogen, that doesn't mean you're going to lose muscle. So what ends up happening is if you eat more dietary fat, you have more satiation.
Mm-hmm.
that meal stays with you longer. That's one of the disadvantages of a zero fat diet, is that you're always hungry.
Right.
You're hungry an hour after you ate.
Right.
Because there's nothing to slow down the digestion. And keep in mind that the more food you eat, the more you oxidize. And the more you oxidize, the more damage you create to the tissues.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the reason why they've studied cultures that eat less overall calories, and they're generally healthier.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, people that do intermittent fasting are generally healthier, meaning they have better, markers, better blood markers.
Right.
So the trick is finding a balance between being optimally healthy and looking optimally good. Because they find that if you eat too few calories, then you start looking emaciated, and that's not good either.
Right.
So I eat about 3 meals a day on average. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4. But generally speaking, I start every day with a protein drink. And the protein drink is either, well, in my case, I usually eat casein protein, because casein protein spikes insulin less than whey. Now, if you happen to be someone who doesn't spike insulin very much, you can get away with whey. But the question is there an advantage to whey protein? And in my view, there isn't, because the advertised advantage is that it gets into your body faster. What's the hurry?
What's the hurry?
There's no hurry. You can eat a piece of chicken and you're fine. You can eat an egg and you're fine. You can eat casein protein and you're fine. There's no hurry.
Whole foods digest much slower. And
yes, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. So I have casein protein. I have a mix of coffee and water. I put almond butter in there. I put coconut oil in there. I put MC3 oil in there, MCT. And then I put a banana in there. Now the banana, if it's green, will have a lower glycemic index than if it's really ripe. Right. So that helps it. And of course, I've got the protein and the fat in there to also slow down the absorption of the carbohydrate from the banana. So it's a perfectly good meal. It's easy. It's fast. I can get out the door. Then about 5 hours later, I'll have either eggs or chicken with steamed mixed vegetables and mashed avocado with olive oil. And I mix all that up. And then maybe 4 hours later, I'll eat chicken with vegetables again. At night, I'll either eat salmon or beef. Typically, I try to do 2 or 3 nights of salmon, followed by 1 night of New York steak. So I don't eat meat as often as fish, but meat is okay.
Natalie put something together. I guess you were kind enough to supply with some images.
What I did is I took photos of because a lot of people say, how do you make vegetables? It's like, oh my God, really?
Well, so let's put this up here. It's a short video. And it can play, and I think we can talk in the background. Let me see.
Yeah, so here I am showing the chopped beets. That's the chopped butternut squash. I put it in the steamer pot. There's the butternut squash in the steamer pot. Now I'm going to wash the zucchini. I'm going to chop up the yellow and the green zucchini. Once that's all chopped up, I'm going to throw all that into the steamer pot. That's up to the top now. So that's a lot of steamed vegetables. There it is lit.
But it cooks down. The nice thing is that when they lose their moisture,
now see right there, I've got the timer. I've got a 40-minute thing, so you can see the vapor coming up. After 40 minutes, there it is. I put it into a big Tupperware container like that.
That looks delicious.
And I'm gonna get ready to make the salmon. There's my ghee. I'm frying my salmon, and then I'm gonna chop an apple into this meal. So I skin it and I chop it. My salmon's almost done. I'm doing this all at the same time. I flipped it over, chopping the apple. This is a great video.
Yeah.
So there it is. I put the apple in with the steamed vegetables. There's my avocado, half an avocado mashed with some olive oil dressing. There it is mashed. This is great.
Yeah.
The olive oil, the salt, the garlic powder, the garlic powder, and the see, there it is almost done. I took the skin off of it. I throw that into the bowl. There's my dressing. I put the dressing in there. Bada bing, some some pecan bits. Now, isn't that a lovely meal?
That's delicious looking. That's amazing.
Pecan, apple, steamed vegetables, salmon, avocado, olive oil. Bam, baby.
We're going to call that salmon a la Brignole. That's what we're going to call it.
That is one of the healthiest meals you can make.
Why do you take the skin off the salmon? I love it when it's crisp. I eat the skin. You don't like it?
Yeah, I don't. But
The
it's probably
they say that's where the mercury is. Is that why you don't eat it?
no. I haven't thought of the mercury. It just by the way, I love the skin of chicken, so there's no reason why I wouldn't love the skin of the salmon, especially when it's nice and grilled like that.
Yeah.
So there's nothing. It's just a habit. It's not there's no nutritional reason why I do that.
Plus, you mince the fish, so
right. It would be hard to do that with the skin.
Yeah, a sheet of the skin. So, so you eat on average about 3 times a day. Do you have a post-workout meal, or that it just you follow your meal schedule regardless of if it's right after you worked out or not?
It depends on what my schedule was. In other words, if I eat the meal before the workout, right before the workout, then I don't eat right after the workout because I'm not yet hungry.
Right.
But if I ate my workout before the meal, let's say 2 hours before the workout, then as soon as I'm done with the workout, I'll eat a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens is after the workout, sometimes I feel a little bit low blood sugary, right? But if I'm not yet hungry enough to eat a meal, I'll eat some watermelon. And that way I'll just bring my glucose level up a little bit. Right. And since it's post-workout, and since most of that is going back into glycogen replenishment, you're not going to get quite the negative effect that you'd get if you ate a high glycemic fruit at another time of the day.
Do you monitor how much protein you get? Do you follow the 1 gram per pound of body weight edict that seems to drive the bodybuilding industry?
Well, as you know, protein has been overemphasized in bodybuilding for years. And people have thought that they're supposed to eat, sometimes I hear 2 grams per pound of body weight.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So some people think really 1 gram per pound is enough. It's like actually 1 gram per 2 pounds of body weight is enough.
Right.
So really what you saw there is a serving of salmon, that size, same size of beef or same size serving of chicken is what I typically eat. And I eat 2 or 3, no more than 3 of those servings per day, plus the protein drink. So we're not talking about a lot of protein. I'm not neurotic about counting. Right. And I don't really think that people need to worry about weighing themselves and then doing the math and then weighing their food. And I just think if you eat, about a 5-ounce serving of protein 2 or 3 times a day, you're getting more than enough protein to serve your needs. And my muscle building, I mean, I'm obviously not training for competition right now. And if I was, and I was dieting more, I would have to increase my protein intake because I'll be decreasing my calories in other areas.
Right.
So I'd have to compensate for that. But in terms of my workouts, my workouts are fantastic right now. And that's what I get, about 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Now, I got to put this up because I know instinctively there are people going, oh, come on, Doug, you got to eat more protein than that. And you got to be more anal about how you eat. And you have to be more, you can't do this like that, Doug. I got to put this picture up because I think this is a picture that you took when you were 60, maybe 61. But I don't care who you are. I'd like to look like that. And if I could look like that and not be so overzealous about my diet, that's the best of all worlds. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's 54 years old.
Oh, okay. But still.
And I competed, as you know, in the AAU Mr. Universe in 2019 at the age of 59, right, and took first place. And again, same protein intake, slightly more than I just described. Nothing fancy, nothing extraordinary. Okay, so do you change when you're bulking versus cutting? Or do you even care about bulking and cutting? Do you keep your nutrition pretty much steady? Listen, over the years, I've been told that people eat as many as 10,000 calories a day in the off season. I don't understand that. I frankly almost don't believe it. And the reason I say that is because if I tried to eat 5,000 calories a day, my belly would burst. I would be so uncomfortable eating that many calories. So, I mean, I think at my most, I think I might have been eating 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day, but I was extremely uncomfortable. And of course, spending a lot of time on the toilet. Yes. It's a very uncomfortable thing. And you have to believe that what is that uncomfortable is also unhealthy. Yes. And that's where the younger guys
don't care about health. They just want to be massively big and ripped. But the reality is that for those of us, including me, I mean, I'm speaking of me. I mean, I'm 62. I'll be 63 in June. It's more important to look great, be strong, but also live long.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, they can coexist.
Right.
And frankly, there's a very strong argument that says that these people that bulk up in the off season lose a lot of that muscle during the dieting process anyway. And the end result, if you took two people, one that bulked up and one that didn't, they end up about the same weight on stage, because the guy that got massive and very unhealthy, by the way, in the off season, lost, most of that bulk when he dieted down.
Right. Absolutely. Plug your website real quick before we take our first commercial break.
Okay. I'm at DougBrignole.com. And then I'm also do the online trainer certification, which is smarttraining365.com. So you can get the book at my website, and you can get the online course at the Smart Training 365.
Do you do nutrition counseling at all, or do you talk about nutrition in any of your books?
Well, my last book is strictly biomechanics.
Right.
But I will say, and I'm sure you know this very well, that nutrition is a very, very hotly debated subject.
Yes. Yes.
And so, number one, my expertise is in biomechanics. My expertise is not in biochemistry. So I always tell people, look, this is what I do. This is what has worked for me. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm a, PhD in nutrition or biochemistry.
Right.
There are other people that come from a place that's more informed than me. And so I don't really want to speak much about the subject other than my experience. This is what I've done. This is what works for me. This is what I believe.
And nutrition is extremely individual. Each of us is very, very unique when it comes to nutrition. Things that work for you may not work for me, and vice versa.
They've done studies that have shown that people lose weight on low carb diets, but not on low fat diets, and other people lose weight on low fat diets, but not on low carb diets. So you're right. It's kind of all over the map.
Yeah. I want to take a break. When we come back, we have lots more to talk about. I want to talk about sleep. I want to talk about supplements. I want to talk about caffeine. We're talking with Doug Brignole, and we're actually in Doug's kitchen. If you saw that video, I all of a sudden became very, very hungry. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. I could eat like Doug for sure.
Those are great pictures, huh?
Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. Protein. As a listener of this show, you know how important your gut is to your overall health. Bioptimizers has a potent product to heal and repair your gut unlike anything else. It's called Leaky Gut Guardian. It's powered by patented IGY Max, an egg-based protein that enhances gut health, reverses antibiotic damage, and strengthens your immune system. Available in 2 delicious powders, vegetarian vanilla and chocolate carnivore. Simply mix it with your favorite beverage. Repair your gut and power up your immune system risk-free and save 10% off. Go to shrnetwork.biz/leaky gut. Don't delay. Fix your gut today. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. The power of light can be truly life-changing and an important element for every superhuman. Because of this, I want you to experience the power of award-winning Saluma light therapy. Saluma utilizes NASA research technology to improve health at the cellular level and is cleared by the FDA to effectively treat a variety of pain, muscle and joint conditions, as well as face
facial wrinkles and acne. Our entire team here at Superhuman Radio uses it. Its innovative shape-taking design allows for easy placement anywhere on the body. Choose from 13 different models. For an exclusive listener discount, go to shrnetwork.biz/Celuma. That's CELLUMA. And use code SHR10 to save 10% off of one of these award-winning devices.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. Doug, the G is silent in your name, right? It's Brignole, right?
You are very clever. Technically, it's a French name, and so it would be Brignole.
Brignole, okay.
So the R would be in your throat. It would be Brignole. But
Brignole.
You say it with a regular R and the regular French GN,
Right.
which is a ñ sound.
Because I had that problem when the very first time I had Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale on, I called Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale because in Brooklyn, no one said the E, and he corrected me. He said, no,
right.
Pasquale. I said, okay, sorry. Okay, so let's see here. We have lots of questions. I promise we're going to get to everybody's question. Just please sit tight. We'll get to everybody's question.
Oh, many questions, huh?
Yeah, we have quite a few. So you're a popular guy. So I'm a big fan of stopping my food intake a minimum of 3 hours before bedtime because I learned that from Dr. Dale Bredesen, the guy who pioneered the studies that led to the book, The End of Alzheimer's, UCLA trained physician and scientist. And he said, if you're eating very close to bedtime, the autophagy doesn't happen in the brain that cleans up the plaque and all that sort of stuff. So my hard and fast rule is I do time restricted feeding. So I stop eating at 6 p.m. What about you? Is sleep important? And also how does sleep jive with your diet?
Well, obviously it's important to get enough sleep. And I don't know that there's that much of a connection between the diet and the calories I eat or the type of food that I eat and the amount of sleep. But more than anything else, brain function, for crying out loud. If you don't get enough sleep, you just, will have accidents.
Right.
Sometimes dangerous accidents, sometimes not so much. But, I'm very busy. I do a lot of writing. We're doing podcasts right now. So we're doing a lot of different projects. I can't afford to have my brain not be firing. And I'm also extremely curious and hungry for more info. So I'm always reading. I've got a stack of books. I've got, readers in the restroom. I mean, I'm always reading or writing or speaking. And so for the most part, I sleep for brain purposes. And of course, it also serves my health needs as well.
Because sleep impairs your ability to become lean too. We know that there's plenty of studies that show because of insulin, because of glucose management, people who don't sleep well get fat. We know that. So
well, they've connected lack sleep cortisol increase.
Okay.
Right. You produce more cortisol.
Right.
When you don't have enough sleep.
So where do you stand on caffeine? Caffeine is probably the single most abused drug in the country today and maybe around the world. Are you an avid user of caffeine? I heard you say you drink a little coffee in your shake in the morning.
I put a little coffee in the shake, and then I also take a caffeine pill, usually either about an hour before the workout or at midday, depending on, whether I'm feeling a slump at midday or not. I'm against pre-workouts because I just don't think I need anything other than maybe just a little caffeine. So why bother with something that's more complicated than that? I don't believe in a pre-workout meal. I don't believe in a post-workout meal or a post-workout drink. I just go by how I feel, and it's worked fairly well.
This is so counter to everything. I mean, I'm sure there are people in the audience whose heads are exploding, going, because I was actually at the Arnold one year when Ronnie Coleman competed and won, and because I'm media, I get to go anywhere and everywhere. I think Aaron Singerman was with me this year. And so they had because Ronnie won, at the end of the show, they have a thing where if, you're a VIP, you get to sit in and ask Ronnie questions. I'll never forget this. It was hilarious. So Ronnie's a very simple guy, simple life, simple type of guy. He's not. And so this kid stands up and says, Ronnie, do you have a favorite post-workout drink? And Ronnie said, no, he didn't. He goes, I usually have a couple chicken breasts with barbecue sauce and some potatoes. And so the kid goes to educate Ronnie. I mean, keep in mind, this guy's winning Olympias. He's winning Arnold's.
Yeah, right.
He goes, well, haven't you heard about the anabolic window and 80 grams of dextrose and 40 grams of whey protein and 200 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid? And Ronnie just looked at him and says, no, I never heard of it. He goes, maybe I'll give it a try. And that was it. And it was kind of humorous to me because, here's a guy who's, stepping on stage close to 300 pounds and ripped. Yeah. And what he did was it completely flies in the face of marketing, nutritional supplement marketing. And nobody picked up on it. You'd think more people would have said, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. Ronnie doesn't do it. But instead, they were trying to educate him to catch up with him.
Right. Look, there are a lot of studies that are just really impractical. Like, for example, I remember I saw a study for glucosamine and that it helped people's joints. But the studies used massive amounts of glucosamine that was injected. And when you go to the health food store, you're getting a much smaller dose and it's not injected, it's oral. And so the idea that you're going to get the same or even close to the same results that they got in the study just is ridiculous.
Right.
So there's a lot of studies like this that are technically true, but in the real world, they just don't work as well as you want them to work or as much as the marketers want you to believe they work. Or as you need them to work. The regular simple method works fine.
So to wrap up the caffeine thing, what do you take? 100 milligrams of caffeine anhydrous before you work out?
Well, the caffeine pill that I take is basically a generic CVS version of no dose.
Right.
No dose has been around for a long time. I'm not exactly sure how many milligrams it is. Yeah. It might be 50 milligrams or something. The kick I get from that is usually less than a kick I get from a cup of coffee.
Interesting.
So I don't know because there's something else in the coffee that helps the absorption of the caffeine, or there's more caffeine in a cup of coffee. I don't exactly know. But generally speaking, I find it's just always easy to, and by the way, if I'm driving, I always have something in my car, some caffeine in my car that you can just, swig with some iced tea or something or water. And that way you're not going to have an accident, if you're feeling like you're dozing off. So it's just usually not as much fun as a cup of coffee, of course, not as tasty as a cup of coffee. I love coffee. Right. But there's been lots of studies, by the way, that have shown that, as much as people have been trying to vilify coffee for so many years, there's very little evidence of any negative effects of coffee. And a lot of evidence of positive effects in terms of, brain function and retention and cleaning out your kidneys and
right.
Things like that.
Last question I have for you on this topic, and then we're going to start working through the questions from the audience.
Okay.
Do you have any favorite supplements? Are you a fan of creatine, for instance?
I've researched creatine and I take creatine. But I have never experienced any kind of muscle increase from creatine in terms of growth, as much as I've experimented with it. I'm not an endurance athlete. I understand that it does make a difference to endurance athletes in terms of performance. However, there are a lot of health benefits to creatine also.
Yes.
In fact, I think they're even using it for people with, neurological disorders. So they have found that, there's some brain benefits and neurological benefits. So I take creatine just as a matter of course, a matter of keeping, my nutrients at an optimum level, but I don't do it because I think it's going to keep my muscles big or make me any stronger. I think vitamin D3 is very important.
Do you get sun?
I get sun, yes, but what I've read is even people that get sun, and by the way, when I go out in the sun, I usually go out no more than 20 minutes at a time, 10 minutes per side, because I don't want to burn. Right. So I get very tan if I go out 20 minutes a day, every day. I get very tan eventually, but I don't want to do more than that. And so I just take, I think it's 5,000 milligrams of vitamin D3 in the morning and 5,000 in the evening.
Yeah, 5,000 I use. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first question comes from Brian Cunningham. And I think you actually answered this, but let's go ahead and answer it now. Does everyone do better on a high-fat, low-carb diet, or does it depend on the metabolic typing?
I'm tempted to say that everybody would benefit from this diet. I'm tempted to say that. And if I don't say that people would do better on this type of diet, I would say that they don't do badly on it. In other words, for people that are concerned about eating more dietary fat, I would dissuade that thinking. I would say it's not bad to eat a higher fat diet, especially if most of those fat calories are coming from olive oil and avocado and omega-3. But again, I'm not a PhD in this subject, and so I'm not going to make any statements that might be wrong. I do know that, there's a lot of people promoting a paleo way of eating. And so this would fall under paleo, because the paleo thinking is that we were hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers ate meat, which had fat, and vegetables. But if any of you have read the book Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, or The Story of the Human Body, both of which would explain to you that, there is no such thing as one paleo diet, because all over the world, depending on the climate you were living in,
availability.
Sometimes people didn't have access to any animals. Sometimes people had access to animals, but no plants, like the Eskimos ate nothing but, seal and whale meat. Right. So there is no one thing that we can say, that's the way we evolved to eat that particular diet, because literally there might be something like, 80 different types of diets that our ancestors evolved to accommodate.
And in fact, I had him on the show twice. The Story of the Human Body.
Daniel Nathan. Daniel
Lieberman.
Yeah.
And I asked him if there was evidence that people who lived by the ocean ate more fish. And he said, in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. Just because you had access to fish didn't mean you ate a lot of fish.
Right.
And so,
what if you didn't live near an ocean? How do you get your omega-3 then?
Yeah, you didn't. Well, you had to get it somewhere other way.
You had to get it from your seeds and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was fascinating. Robert Thompson, I think you answered this question also. As far as you believe, do you have to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight? And his doctor advises him 1 gram per kilogram, which is a half a gram per pound, which sounds like more like what you do.
Right, 1 gram per 2 pounds of body weight.
And let's be clear about something. And I'm doing this for a reason, right? Because we all eat we don't eat protein because we love protein. I do. I love some of the proteins I eat. But the reality is we are all looking for results. We are results-based dieters. We want muscle. We want to be healthy. And this is the way Doug eats, and this is the way Doug looks. And if, I love that old Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? So I'm sure there's people in the audience going, there you go. I'm sure people in the audience are going, come on, Doug, if you upped your protein, you'd be so much better off, blah, blah, blah. But how is it working for those of you out there who are eating 250, 300 grams of protein a day? Are you really healthier? Are you really stronger? Are you really bigger? How do you know? Have you ever cut your protein back? The Bulgarians were famous for protein fasting. They would not eat any protein for 3, 4, 5 days, and then they'd put protein back in the diet. And what they discovered was that when you fasted, you actually had a better response with the protein that you did eat.
Yeah, that actually makes some sense. I think the problem is that people don't really know. They're doing so many things at one time.
Yeah,
they don't know what's working.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're taking anabolics,
that's me.
If you're taking anabolics and you're eating 250 grams of protein or 300 grams of protein in a day, you might say, well, I'm huge. So yeah, the protein intake might be working. Well, have you tried taking anabolics and only eating 100 grams of protein a day?
Which in theory, if you're using anabolics and the anabolic process is ramped up, you should be able to get away with eating less protein and either maintaining more muscle or building muscle.
You're protein synthesizing. You're actually making protein.
Right.
Yeah. The thing is that I always tell people, look, why don't you just do your own little study? Why don't you eat 100 grams of protein a day for a month and eat 2 grams of protein for a month and see if you feel or see a difference? So what I predict you will see is that when you're eating 200 grams of protein in a day, you will feel less good during a meal because you'll feel too stuffed, but you won't see bigger muscle gains.
Isn't that something?
I just don't think it's necessary to strain the gut.
Austin Stout says that he sees this all the time with his clients, normal blood glucose, but hyperinsulinemia. I think hyperinsulinemia is a bigger problem in the United States than we think it is. I think it's the reason for, things like neuropathies. I think it's the reason for brain malfunctions and dementia. And I think that if doctors stopped checking blood glucose and started checking insulin, we could actually heal people faster. The analogy I give is if you and I were in the car and we're driving along, but we're looking down. We're not looking at the road. We're not looking at our speedometer. We're looking at the gas pedal, and we're going, how fast do you think I'm going, Doug? The gas pedal is about 1.5 inches from the floor, and we're trying to guess how fast we're going based on that. If you're going uphill, you're going to be going a lot slower than you think you are.
Right.
Now, not looking at insulin gives us a false representation of where we are health-wise.
If you were to do an internet search on negative effects of too much insulin production, you will see the list. It's a long list. It's everything from immune disorders, increased cancer risk, increased cardiovascular risk, increased diabetes risk. The list is long. Yes, you're right. I mean, once you understand the negative effects of eating too many foods that boost insulin, and not knowing what your insulin level is and not caring about what your insulin level is, all of a sudden someone finds themselves at 48 years old having a stroke or a heart attack, and they go, how did this happen? What do you mean, how did this happen? You've been chipping away at this for the last 30 years, eating your pancakes every day, eating your waffles, eating your high glycemic carbs and your dessert after every dinner. And, maybe you didn't gain a lot of body fat, so you thought you were in the clear. But no, if you're producing too much insulin, you will be having a health consequence eventually.
Charles Williams III is asking, do you like macadamia nut better than olive oil? Which one do you think is better?
That's interesting. I've never tried macadamia nut oil. In fact, I haven't even seen it at Trader Joe's or at the regular grocery store. I like macadamia nuts, and so I do eat those. In fact, one of my favorite snacks is macadamia nuts and brie.
That sounds good.
Sometimes if I'm in between meals and I don't have time to eat, I'll have an apple, some macadamia nuts, and some cheese. And that's a perfectly good, healthy meal. So rather than having, these, pre-prepared bars, sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're not. But it's just so easy just to, in the refrigerator, just keep your apples, your nuts. I have almonds, cashews, macadamia nuts. And then I usually have a variety of cheeses. I have Fontina cheese. I have brie. I have, what's the other one I use? Butter. What's it called? Butterkraus or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one.
Butter case. That's what it's called. Butter case.
Butter case. Yeah, I like Havarti. Havarti is a good go-to cheese for me. And I also like Jarlsberg, the Swiss cheese. We're going to take our last commercial break, and then we got lots of questions we'll get to. Sit tight. We'll be right back with more of Doug Brignole. This show, you know how important your gut is to your overall health. Bioptimizers has a potent product to heal and repair your gut unlike anything else. It's called Leaky Gut Guardian. It's powered by patented IGY Max, an egg-based protein that enhances gut health, reverses antibiotic damage, and strengthens your immune system. Available in 2 delicious powders, vegetarian vanilla and chocolate carnivore. Simply mix it with your favorite beverage. Repair your gut and power up your immune system risk-free and save 10% off. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Leaky leaky gut. Don't delay. Fix your gut today. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor? Strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Protein. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/try20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back. All right, let's work our way through the rest of these questions. Ali Click, who's watching on YouTube, wants to know what carbohydrates you enjoy.
Well, the carbohydrates that I typically favor are the steamed vegetables. I do eat 1 banana a day. As I said earlier, I eat some watermelon. I try to eat an apple a day. But I seriously avoid starches, which doesn't mean that I never have them. The other day, I was just in one of those moods. It was a weekend, so I got some rice at the deli. But more often than not, I don't actually even like the taste of rice that much. It's a higher glycemic carbohydrate than the steamed vegetables. It's obviously lower in fiber, lower in vitamins and minerals than vegetables.
Right.
So I just love the idea when I eat my steamed vegetables and my avocado and my olive oil, and I just love the idea that, and then sometimes I'll put some spinach in there, some spinach leaves or some romaine leaves in there to add some crunchiness.
Right.
You can't get a healthier meal. No. So I just love knowing that I'm giving my body the very, very best nutrients that I can give it.
So Tommy D says, are most of your veggies and fruits organic? Do you stay away from conventional as much as possible?
I don't. I was speaking recently with a guy that studies nutrition, and he said that when he can get organic and it's not overly expensive and it's available, he says, I always go for the organic. He goes, but when the organic is either way too expensive or just not available, I don't sweat when I don't get it. And I kind of feel that same way. I don't favor the organic. Maybe I don't know enough, but I feel like, I look at my blood test results and everything looks really, really good. And I feel really, really good. And I seem to be aging slower than the average person. So, I think I'm doing things, right enough.
PK Grad Greek says, I bought Doug's biomechanics book 2 months ago and excellent. And
thank you for that. I appreciate hearing that.
Ali Click has another question. How do you feel about pre-workout powders? You answered that. You just use a little straight caffeine and that's it. Maybe 50
either a caffeine pill or a cup of coffee.
Bill Bergman says, what does Doug think about bodybuilding supplements in general? I guess,
hello, Bill Bergman. How are you, buddy? I have mixed feelings about bodybuilding supplements. I don't like hype. I've never liked hype. right? So when I see anything, whether it's a recommendation for an exercise that'll put slabs of muscle on your body, come on now.
Yeah.
Or when you see, something at GNC and it talks about these, extremely, advanced nutrients that will give you unbelievable. I always take that with a grain of salt. Look, if anything was that good, it would be FDA regulated, right?
They would block it. They would block it from getting it. Which goes to this next question, and I can actually speak very intelligently about this question because I did some of the earliest shows on myostatin inhibition. I actually communicated with Dr. Se-Jen Lee at MIT, who discovered myostatin. But he was trying to solve neuromuscular disorders for people. He never wanted to come on my show because he thought we were a bunch of vain idiots, that we just, he's trying to get people with multiple muscular diseases to walk again, degenerative disease to walk again. And we want bigger biceps. And he was very frank with me because, no, I'd never do your show. But he always answered my questions. And as a result of that, I did some of the earliest interviews about myostatin with some of his colleagues who did come on the show. And the watershed moment for me was I did a show, the State University of New York did a study on myostatin inhibition in mature rodents. All of the original studies were done by Se-Jen and his group, were done in embryos that were knocked out, and then they were born with no myostatin, and then they went from there. But let's face it, none of us want to go back in the womb and start over. We want to put on muscle now, and we're already mature. And the research on mature rodents and myostatin inhibition showed that inhibition of a minimum of 97% continuously was the only way to see increased growth in muscle. And as soon as you removed it, the muscles went back to normal size again, which means that chasing myostatin inhibition is a waste of time. We get some myostatin inhibition just from training. We get some from using things that increase growth hormone. But the dream of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that everybody had in their minds when they heard about myostatin doesn't exist and never will exist. But anyway.
Well, let me answer that question. Do I think that myostatin blocking supplement will exist one day? Obviously, that depends an awful lot on whether or not it can be first established that blocking myostatin is actually a good thing, right? If we don't know that it's a good thing, and by the way, when I say a good thing, I don't necessarily mean a muscle growth thing. So the study that I read said that the animals that they studied that were partially myostatin inhibited were muscular and a little bit stronger than the non-myo. But the ones that were very myostatin inhibited were even bigger, but completely weak.
Yes. In fact, they have more soft tissue problems. There's racing dogs that are myostatin null. They can't race. They have no endurance. They have no strength. And when they do try to apply themselves, they snap ligaments. Right.
So there's a consequence. And that's the important thing is if we are not able to understand the consequence or curb the consequence to myostatin inhibition, then it is a dangerous road to start producing myostatin supplements. Supplements that'll reduce myostatin production.
And the reality is that we have myostatin inhibition. Geronda was a huge fan of fertilized chicken eggs, and Trader Joe's out in Arizona used to sell fertilized chicken eggs. Fertilized chicken eggs are high in follistatin. Follistatin is not only a negative regulator of myostatin, but also it's anabolic in its own. So whether or not Geronda knew, that's when he wrote his article, 36 eggs a day, to combat anabolic steroids. And so there was some truth to that. But
aren't there follistatin supplements that people have tried?
Yes. And those, so the first company to isolate follistatin from fertilized chicken eggs was a company in Texas. And they got in touch with me on my show, and they sent me pounds of egg yolk powder that was run through a molecular sieve to isolate the follistatin. And I saw changes in my body. But the problem is that once I stopped using it, I didn't see any more changes. Everything went back to normal.
Right.
And that's why the product disappeared, because it just chasing the follistatin / myostatin inhibition is not worthy of anyone's effort. It's not. Just train harder, sleep better.
I'm sure there are people that are listening right now that are going to say, so what's the problem with taking it forever? They would say that, right? I mean, they'd say, well, I take protein every day. Why wouldn't I take follistatin every day? Or I take creatine every day. Why wouldn't, or I take insulin every day because I'm diabetic. Again, I think the root of it is, can I take it without consequence?
Yeah.
That's the real thing.
And the indicators are it's harmful. It really, there are.
Yeah.
Let's plug your website one more time, Doug.
Okay. DougBrignole.com is my website. And there you can find my book. I also have some articles that I've written there in my blog. And then if you want to get one of the free motion machines, we make them available on our website. The online course is Smart Training 365. We have all kinds of videos, instructional videos. We also offer a certification that is CEC approved with NASM and the ISSA, which is Fred Hatfield's original organization. So, the online course is fantastic. And of course, we're working on our podcast right now. So we're trying to get out there as much as possible.
Excellent. Excellent. And share this show to help him get out there. Doug, thanks for being here today, brother.
My pleasure always. Thank you, sir.
And we'll see everybody tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. And those of you who participated live, thank you so much, because it makes the show so much better. We'll see you tomorrow.